You're listening to the Light Novel Podcast. Visit us online at lightnovelpodcast.com. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Light Novel Podcast. Tonight, we are going to be focusing on the J-Novel Club series, Infinite Dendrogram. If you've been following us since episode 1, you know that there's quite a number of us that enjoy this series. There's actually 5 of us on the podcast tonight because we were all kind of fighting over who got to talk about Infinite Dendrogram. So tonight I've got Bio-Gundam, I've got Kyle, I've got Terrence, and I've got Tom with me, and we're going to be talking about volumes 1 to 3 of the light novel series because I think there's plenty to cover in those volumes. First off, we always cover whatever little bit of news is going on in the light novel world. Something that came out of Anime Expo that we didn't get a chance to talk about last time was the anime coming for So I'm a Spider, So What? That what got announced. Actually, I think initially it got announced because it was leaked by a store clerk who took a picture of the latest manga version and it had like a wrap around it that announced it. I don't know if you guys saw that, but yeah, so apparently this guy snapped it in the like stock room, put it out there on social media 2 days before the official announcement.
Hey, nobody keeps secrets nowadays.
No kidding, right? I think somebody got fired.
That's what they do with whistleblowers.
Yeah, that's right. So, and then outside of that, we'll talk about the probably more exciting one in just a minute. But then there was also an announcement for a light novel series getting a new anime season. This one is not available in English. I'll butcher the Japanese. Oshiego ni Kyōhaku Sareru no ga Hanzai Desu, which apparently, according to Anime News Network, is it a crime if you're threatened by your student? So basically, the story is about a 27-year-old teacher who works at a cram school. While he's very talented at teaching, he's not a big fan of kids. Anyway, one day when he's teaching some elementary school kids, one of the fifth graders comes up and gives him a hug and says she loves him. Of course, it's nothing that he's done about it, but one of his students, older students, captures it on camera and then blackmails him into giving her private lessons. Only in Japan, I guess. I don't know. It says that she blackmails him into giving her personal lessons at night, and they actually put quotations around personal lessons. I'm kind of afraid of what this is going to be, honestly.
Yeah, those quotations, they're important.
Right?
Yep.
Oh, do you know something about this one, Kyle?
Nope. But I'm going to look it up after the podcast.
Yeah. So anyway, that one's getting an anime. That doesn't say when, but I guess it's coming eventually. And then finally, out of San Diego Comic-Con, Viz had a huge My Hero Academia panel. The creator of My Hero Academia was there. There was lots of, just on a really quick side note, there was a lot of sort of buzzing on Twitter about the fact that they had a room for 1,000 people or something like that, and 12,000 people lined up. Basically there was a lot of discussion about the fact that anime seems, despite there being constantly a huge presence of anime and anime fans, they apparently keep drawing the short end of the stick for the room sizes. So apparently that was the thing. But anyway, getting back to actual light novel news, they announced that Viz has licensed the My Hero Academia light novels. And those apparently are side stories. They're not it's not like an actual series or a retelling of the manga or anime. Am I correct?
Yeah, I believe they were just side stories. I think the main series obviously get to be going through the manga, and I think they want to keep it that way.
Yeah, they are side stories. I actually, I'm like a kind of I'm kind of like a fan of the series. I sometimes watch videos, and I remember in one video that I watched on YouTube, somebody mentioned that there was a side story that explained why like a certain theory was wrong, and the content of that side story kind of happened concurrently with one of the chapters and explained why a character wasn't there.
Oh, okay. So in other words, if you're a fan of like the manga or the anime, this is pretty good material because it's actually going to fill in some of the gaps.
Yeah.
Is that kind of, yeah? Oh, okay, cool. Anyway, so I mean, you know, lots of people obviously hyped for that. It's a huge, huge fan base. One that I've been very interested in checking out, but have not yet. And I really think that's it for light novel news. We did want to say we're going to make a very thin connection about the fact that this past weekend or so, well, I guess it was the 20th, Mirai no Mirai opened up in Japanese theaters, apparently not doing very well based on the sales compared to what projections were. But of course, it's been picked up, the light novel version of it's been picked up by Yen On. Well, at that, they premiered the very first trailer showing that, oh my God, the final Evangelion film is actually going to happen before I die.
It's real, fellas.
I know, right? Well, okay, as real as like an Ava like spinning through the air firing a gun. Woo!
Was that a new Ava design, or was that from like another movie?
That was I believe, sort of a Frankenstein Ava, mainly based on the one that was in the third movie. The pink one, remember? There was like that pink one in the third movie, and they...
I haven't actually seen the rebuild films yet.
Oh,
I plan to, though. I plan to.
Well, there's no point. You might as well just wait another year or two until you can actually watch the whole thing. Because I think they said, what, it's coming out in 2020, or was it 2019? I can't remember now.
I believe it was 2020.
Yeah, I thought it was 2020 as well, because I remember looking at it going, yeah, okay, lots going to happen in a year and a half. We'll see about that. But, well, still, there's footage and an actual trailer, and Hideaki Anno's actually gone on tape saying he's making it, so maybe we'll finally get the end of this thing. It'll be interesting to see whether it lines up in any way whatsoever with the TV series, because the third one
Let's hope not.
Well, I don't know how it can. I mean, the third movie just went as far away from Ava as you can get, I think. Like, it was, yeah. Anyway, that's enough of that, because it's not really like novels. We just, some of us are Ava fans and wanted to sneak it in and thought, hey, it was a trailer on a movie that's getting a light novel.
Yeah, hot take. The original Ava series is way better than the rebuild movies. Fight me.
I don't even think you need to say fight me, Gundam, because I don't think anyone's going to disagree. You know what? I like the rebuild movies.
Please just put the original series on Blu-rays. I just want a way to actually watch it.
I agree.
I just want a good ending, not some weird kind of choke someone out and then it's over and it's like, what did I just watch? What did I just
Speaking of an ending, I noticed when Justus was talking about the fourth movie, he was like, finally we'll get an end to this thing. He was clearly trying to avoid saying an end of Evangelion.
I totally was. I was like, oh crap, we already got that, and it still was as confusing as hell, but whatever.
Yep. That's what I've heard anyways.
Well,
not that I can watch it or anything. Please, Blu-rays, please.
Yeah, it amazes me it's a series that no one's picked up, but anyway, whatever. Like I said, we're going very off track, so let us bring it all back to the actual reason that we're here tonight, and that is the light novel series Infinite Dendrogram. Like I said at the outset, this one's being released in English by J Novel Club. They've not released Volume 7 yet, have they, or is that...
No, it hasn't been released yet.
7 is almost finished released. However, I have been talking to Steiner, and he says that the translation has already been finished.
Cool.
Then that'll bring them completely up to date with Japan, I believe, right?
Yeah, they are up to date right now.
September 11th, Volume 7 comes out in English. So there you go. According to Amazon. Infinite Dendrogram is a light novel series focusing on a VRMMO world that is notable because of its infinite level of choices.
And realism.
Yes, and extreme realism. In fact, I don't know. I'm probably getting ahead of myself. It focuses on main character who is Ray Starling. He's waited, it's a year and a half, if I recall.
Yeah, around there.
Yeah, so he's waited a year and a half since the launch of the game to get into it because he was studying for entrance exams and everything else. And so now that he's got some time between college actually starting and the end of his exams, he decides he's going to finally pick up and play this game because his brother's been playing it for the whole time and, probably taunting the hell out of him that he isn't allowed to play. And so he joins this game, becomes this paladin character, and the game is probably notable aside from just the infinite choices. The other two things that I found very interesting about it, one is called the Embryo System. And so basically when you join the game, you are assigned a unique, it's kind of weird to call it a weapon because it's not really a weapon per se. It can be a weapon.
It's a unique ability.
Yeah. It can take different forms depending on who you are as a person and as a player, basically. It grows with you. That's kind of the idea. It's kind of like having like an ultimate move that develops and grows as you grow as a player, which is pretty awesome.
I think like the Embryo System is very similar to the Sacred Gear system in High School DxD in a way.
I haven't read DD, and I don't think I've gotten enough into the anime that I can make that comparison. But I mean, it's not a unique thing. We've seen it in anime and stuff, right?
Yeah, it's not a unique idea, but I think Infinite Dendrogram does a really good job at like showcasing all these different abilities. Like it's also similar to JoJo in that aspect of where, everyone has these like unique abilities, and it's not what you do with it, it's also how you use those abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Like just something as simple as, controlling Earth. Well, you can do lots of things with that. You just have to be creative, and I really like that that whole aspect of the embryos is how they can change and evolve, and they're changing forms and their powers change, and it's really cool.
It does seem like some of the characters get a raw deal though. Like for instance, there's one character at the very beginning, they get like a baby carriage, like that's their embryo. Like there's some that are just like ridiculous, and it seems like they'd be unwieldy. But I don't know. We'll see.
Well, even in Infinite Dendrogram, there's non-combat classes. So, you say baby carriage, you're not going to be swinging it at people, but, it could be useful in another way.
It could be like that baby carriage could like be something. It's like a pocket dimension where players can heal and stuff, and then it evolves into like a hospital bed or like a hospital, and people can go in there and heal.
And you know what? And that's, I think, one of the really cool things is that you're right. That could absolutely happen because the way these embryos...
Dendrogram is such a weird series.
Yeah, like the way these embryos change and develop, and what you'd think that there's a logical progression for the embryos, but not so much. Like, it's like, oh, my embryos is like a pea shooter. Oh, it evolved to a full-on battleship. Good for me, Holy crap.
Something else that I want to point out, when we were talking about how like maybe this baby carriage could be useful because of the all the other things that you can do in Infinite Dendrogram, we also need to remember that everybody's embryo is based off of the character's mental state and their actions at the beginning of the game when they don't even have their embryo yet.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the embryos, what do they say? Like it takes usually three days? I can't remember the specific time frame.
Here's the thing: is it 3 in-game days?
Yeah.
Have we talked about that yet?
Oh God, no. I haven't. You know what? I haven't even.
Let's talk about this.
I haven't even brushed the surface of this thing yet. Like I was just given the setup of like the story. Basically, like just the basic setup of the story is that Ray joins this game basically to play with his brother and ends up in sort of the medieval side of things, because that's the other thing about Infinite Dendrogram is that each country is like a different kind of setting. Like one is European medieval times, one is like a futuristic city, one is like the ancient Japan. Like there's a whole bunch of different ones, right? Like one's like a desert nation.
It's like that city on Aladdin, I forgot the name of that city, but it's like, the bazaar and the trade market, like, I'll trade you 5 fish for your camel, and Agrabah.
Yeah. So I mean, you've got all these different places, right? And so, I mean, essentially, like the story of, and this is kind of the thing about this that I initially kind of thought, just how engaging is this going to be? The book is basically about Rei playing the game. Like, it's not like Sword Art where it's life or death, or, or even like that. What was that other one where it was like the rich dude paying to win in a VRMMO where it's like, we're going to see how far money gets me. Like, no, like Rei's just this average kid who joins the game and plays, right?
I think one thing I really liked about Infinite Dendrogram is that it actually like captures the experience of playing a video game. Like, if this video game was real, I'd be like, fuck Light Novel Podcast, I want to play Infinite Dendrogram. Like, it literally captures that feeling of playing a video game, and it's not about fan service or, if you're really good at games, you'll become a Chad and pick up all these women, or it's like, gamers are cool. No, it's just, I like playing this game, I have fun, and I have adventures, and that's it.
I did relate to when they talked about there are some players that will love the game, like Bio. I related to how there are some players that might not like the tedium of the game, and also the feeling that, like, you have to put so much in. Some players might not like, that it's so immersive that they have to eat every once in a while. Because you see those criticisms come up with other games. Other people love immersiveness, and then other people just want a story that just kind of goes.
Yeah, so, and I think when you think of like Infinite Dendrogram, and we'll definitely like, I'm not going to go too deep into this point, but like Infinite Dendrogram for like some of the characters, I'm not going to say who, but not going to say who it is, but it almost becomes like a second life to them. Like the life they live outside the game is just to sustain themselves, so they can get back into Infinite Dendrogram.
Well, I think that's the thing. Like, I think that was one of the things that I really liked about not only the novel itself, but the concept of the game. Was that it really was about kind of living that other life, and you could live another life, and there were consequences of your decisions that were permanent. It isn't like one of the things I find frustrating when you play like a VR, like not a VR MMO, just an MMO, like let's say Elder Scrolls Online. I mean, you watch a town burn to the ground and you rescue all these people and everything else, and then you come back a couple hours later and the town's back again because it's got to reset for the next guy to come along and save it from burning down to the ground. Like what you do isn't permanent. And I liked the fact that in Infinite Dendrogram, if you don't save the life of an NPC, that NPC dies and that's it. They're gone from the game. No one else is going to get a chance to save them. That's it. It's permanent. Your decisions and your actions have consequences, and the consequences are permanent, and the consequences have an effect on the game and will therefore have effects on every person who plays the game.
Yeah, it's like a cause and effect system, and because the game is so realistic, I think it can actually like really affect some people. It's just like, oh my god, I think I didn't save that person. What have I done? And another thing we forgot to mention is that at the start, when you were making your character, the game has like 3 options to how you want to view the world, which is anime-like, CG, or realistic. Yeah. And Rei chooses realistic mode.
Yeah. Yeah. Which he regrets at certain points because,
Yep.
Gross.
Yep. All I'm going to say is Volume 2.
Oh my
Volume
God.
2 was such a shift. I'm not going to go into it. We'll talk about that when we get to Volume 2. But Volume 2. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, so, yeah. No, I understand exactly what you mean. And that was where, yeah, you're right. It's a big shift in the book. Like in the first in the first volume, it's really just about the little bit of world building. It's introducing Ray's embryo, which turns out to actually be a girl named Nemesis who can transform into a sword. Eventually, she transforms into other things too, but she transforms primarily into a sword in the first one. We kind of get this whole... It really is at that point very much RPG-ish, right? Like he runs into this NPC who's looking for her sister. He decides to help her. And through his actions, he gains like, rewards. Like he can have a favor from this girl who turns out to be like the the captain of the guard and everything else. Like it really did feel, as much as I liked it and as much as I liked the impact of your decisions and as much as I thought the embryo system was cool, it really felt like a very much by the numbers kind of RPG type story, right?
Yeah, Justice, the thing you forgot to mention is the reason why that girl was looking for his sister is because his brother basically bought out all the berries in town, so the sister had to go out and harvest some more.
The one thing I did like was...
Cause and effect, man.
The one thing I did like, they went back and they brought in the trio talking about that. And basically, there was an evil guy who was planning to do something nefarious with those berries. And so Shu inadvertently actually helps by his idiocy, basically.
I love Shu.
So Shu is Ray's brother. In the game, his name is Shu. And he dresses in a bear costume because when he created his avatar, he inadvertently made his avatar look exactly like he does in real life. And of course, this book basically has the same consequences of... You don't want to necessarily have people find out who you are in real life, because if you piss them off in the game, there could be real world consequences, right? Especially when you consider, like you were saying, the whole grind of the game and everything else. I mean, if you screw somebody out of their hard-earned stuff, it could create some pretty bad feelings.
There's a lot of things I actually want to say about Shu, so I'm just going to say about the stuff that's going to be like non-spoilish. So for you guys, there's actually a lot of hints that Shu is doing like important things behind the scenes. There's a lot of hints about that, and also there's also hints that he is a lot more famous in real life than you would assume.
Oh, I get that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a ton. There's a ton of hints. Like if you go back, once you're done with like even Volume 5, and you go back, like you'll notice them. Like there are just so many hints just dropped. Like characters appearing, talking about certain things. Like I'm sure we'll get to Marie's story later.
Like I've just read Volume 6, and we learn a bit more about Brother Bear, but we still don't know the full story. Like there's little crumbs, and you have an idea what's going on, like both in the real life and like Infinite Dendrogram, but he's definitely like a wild card. Like you don't exactly know what he's up to.
Well, I think that's one of the things about Dendrogram that I like, is that there is a lot of mystery about the characters in real life as well. Like you get the sense that there's a lot going on in the real world with these characters that you're not privy to.
Yeah, like Rook has certain skills, like his reading lips and things like that. Like you're like, what is going on? Like why are you learning lip reading? Like what is your job, or what are you doing in real life?
Yeah. Well, this is it exactly. And I mean the whole, even just how the embryos, like taking a look at the different embryos that people have, that made me start to wonder, like, who is that person really? Because of how embryos form.
Yeah, I have a few theories about Ray. Now, when it comes to Ray as a character, now if you took him out of Infinite Dendrogram, he would seem very boring and copy and paste. I'm the lawful good paladin of justice. But when you put him in the game, it's very telling of what type of person he is. And I think the fact that Nemesis has the ability she has definitely hints that there's more to him than what is being shown or told about, because I have like a few theories about that. Like, I think the first theory I had about why Nemesis has the abilities she does is because Ray has a bit of a dark side that he keeps underneath. You know, everyone has that sort of dark side, but with like Ray, it's like very present, and he desperately tries to fight it. And the second theory I have is Ray is what we would call in the writing world, you know, an unreliable narrator, and some of the information we are given about him from his point of view, you know, about the game or in real life, is half-truths or not the actual reality. And the third theory I have is that through the events of the show, eventually Ray will develop into Infinite Dendrogram's version of Batman, you know, fighting to protect the NPCs who he feels are abused by other players who do not value their existence or lives. Because we're definitely getting hit, like, there's a lot of hints for all those possibilities, especially for number one and like the Theory 1 and Theory 3 I had, because Ray actually actively tries and saves the NPCs, and he actively cares, unlike most of the players.
Yeah, that's almost what Volume 2 was entirely about.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what they talk about. That's the whole reason that he has a maiden embryo, right? Was that people who play the game but view the game as real, or, you know, equivalent to being real, that NPC lives are just as valuable as player lives, if not more so, because if a player dies, they come back, but an NPC won't. Because of that, those are the kind of players who end up with these autonomous maiden type embryos, right? Like, I think that's what who is it? Hugo tells him, right?
Yeah, I love Hugo. Also, before we go on, I want to clarify something. It's not just for the people who are listening to this who haven't yet watched this or read the series and want to get into it. It's not like the players, when they die, they don't have some kind of repercussion. They actually have a 1-day IRL time ban. So they have to wait an entire 24 hours before they go back in. And the thing about that is Infinite Dendrogram actually runs 3 times faster than real world time. So 1 day in the real world is 3 days in the game. So if you die like fast enough and in succession, you're basically going to be left behind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also if you've got like an actual job in Infinite Dendrogram, like say for example you're like now one of the captain of the guard or something like that, and you're dead, you know, what are they gonna do? You know, their strongest fighter or guard is gone for like 3 days. You know, what are they gonna do? What happens if some players or some, you know, bandits cause a muck and hurt people? Like, you know, if say for example you're the type of player who considers this game reality or equal to that, I mean, you're going to feel really bad. It's just like, you know, I failed my comrades.
Yeah, Infinite Dendrogram has like this gigantic theme of, is this game world really just a game as people treat like Grand Theft Auto, or is it more close to, say, like a second world that you have the privilege of visiting through purchasing the headset that you get with Infinite Dendrogram? And I feel that it's done really well.
To me, I just find it interesting, like you were saying, Bio, the whole, like, I think that was where I got interested in Ray's character, was that at first I thought, okay, yeah, he's just going to be the vanilla good guy who, you know, oh, I care about everybody and I need to save everybody, and when something bad happens, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth and I need to fix it.
That's his catchphrase, yeah.
Yep. But then he ends up with this embryo named Nemesis, who, I mean, you know, just by the name alone.
Vengeance is mine, bitch.
And that's it, exactly. And his skills with Nemesis are basically all about revenge and, you know, forcing back what's been forced on them. And it, to me, I got that same impression of you, right? I'm like, this is a kid who on the surface is this good kid, but he is all kinds of scarred and messed up and angry inside, and just is looking for a way to kick back at the world. Like, that was my impression of him.
Yeah, that's sort of my impression as well, because there's actually a quote from Machiavelli that basically says, like, people you only know people from what they show you. And, Ray could be that person, underneath it all, because we don't know what exactly he thinks beneath it all.
Yeah, as you said earlier, he could very well be an unreliable narrator.
And I find that really scary because, like, a part of me feels that, could he actually be the villain? Like, he could actually be one of the villains of Infinite Dendrogram. Like, he could be, the Dark Paladin or, the Black Swordsman. And he just, like, I'm just imagining,
not the Black Swordsman, not the Black Swordsman.
No,
please don't bring that up.
Well, there's too many of those already.
Yeah, no. I'm just I'm just imagining him like looking like Belle from How Not to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon, like from like the Volume 11 cover, like riding a horse with Nemesis, black cloak, red eyes, and just like this giant ass fucking sword, like just galloping through. And people's like, "Oh no, it's Ray!"
Yeah, if you okay, I know that we're only talking about volumes 1 through 3, but I'm going to talk about a cover. If you look at the cover of Volume 7, he looks like a bad guy on that cover. I'm just going to say it. He looks like a bad guy. He's wearing like dark armor, and he's like in an inferno.
Yeah, actually,
well, they've already made that comment a few times too about the armor that he wears, that it's really dark and some of it's kind of cursed.
Yeah.
If I remember, this is kind of spoilers for Volume 5, but in Volume 5, he gets quite a few nicknames, like the Dark Light Paladin, or, like, he gets a lot of these names relating to, like, knights and darkness and paladin. Like, he could literally be, like, this series Batman.
I actually, you know what, I think, Bio, that your analogy of him being a Batman is, I think, closer to what I could see him becoming than an actual villain. Like, I could see your take on him sort of going against other players and becoming like a PK player and taking out
like an anti-hero.
Yeah, I could totally see. I don't think he would.
In that regard, it kind of reminds me of Haseo, except in Haseo from the .hack GU. Series,
oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I know exactly. What
Except
you're talking about.
instead
like,
of being a PKer, he's like a Tian killer.
Yeah, well, and that's what I mean. Like, and and his relationship with Marie, who, I mean, I don't know if we want to get into that, but right at this moment, but given who Marie is and what Marie is doing, I kind of sit there thinking to myself, like, is that going to become almost a mentor kind of relationship? I mean, obviously I don't know because I've only read the first 3 books, but you know what I mean? Like, we do have a character already in the book that is a PK player and a very strong one at that.
Hey, Justice, I've got a great idea. NPC Avengers or Justice League. Like, I could just imagine you'll have Rook, Brother Bear, Marie, Ray, and a few other people, and they'll be like the Justice League.
Please bring back Hugo. I need Cocytus again.
Don't worry, they'll bring back Hugo. He's going to be a recurring character, trust me.
Yeah.
I do find it interesting that, and I think that's probably one of the reasons that I thought the series was so cool, because you can see all of these paths potentially happening. Like just by the very fact that the world is infinite and presents infinite possibilities, there's infinite possibilities for the character too. Like, just because he's starting off this one way doesn't mean he can't go a different way, right?
It's a similar thing, like with the path system in Vampire the Masquerade, or like alignments in D&D. Like, for example, just because you're that lawful good paladin doesn't mean that your character will stay lawful good. Or like in Vampire the Masquerade, you have this path system, and you have, the path of humanity, which is you're a vampire clinging to your humanity to starve off the beast, and you can take other paths like, the path of honorable accord, where you become like chivalrous, courageous, and honorable, to keep the beast at bay, or you take the path of like feral heart and, embrace the beast, and, like there's so many paths in it, I wouldn't say it makes an interesting commentary on morality, but I think it makes an interesting commentary on like different points of view.
Yeah. Like the entire, it's like the view of how people view the game is almost like how people view reality.
Yeah. I mean, you have people like Ray who treats things seriously, and then you have people like, Volume 2 bad guy, or the bad guy in volume 4 or 5 who's just like, lol, fuck consequences, I'm gonna do whatever I want, lol.
Yeah, especially the bad guys in volume 2, because Dendro is their reality.
Well, no, but I mean, that's true. And I think that is, I think that, when you bring up the question of morality, that is one of the things that I really liked about this series too, is that it does show you just when you're presented with no path, like you can take whatever path you want. It's interesting to see what different people will do in terms of how they play the game.
Yeah, because in most games would reward you the most for being neutral. Like if I'm using the alignment system as an analogy, most games would reward you for being neutral evil, chaotic neutral, or just chaotic evil. Just doing whatever the fuck you want. Oh, some dude pays me $1,000. Well, guess what? I'm gonna pickpocket him, steal his money, stab him, do the mission anyway. It's just make merry and have fun. And but with Infinite Dendrogram, you have that choice. You can be a knight, you can be a samurai, you can be a hermit monk, you can be this chaotic arsonist. It's lol, look at me.
You could be
things.
Shun Yu, the Jiangshi. You can throw your arms all around.
Yeah, you could be the Jiangshi.
I think it is interesting to see when you have people presented with all these options. If you're talking a normal RPG, you're right. I mean, you approach a task and you basically have one of two options. Are you going to fail the task or are you going to win at the task? And sometimes, yes, the tasks can be gray area or they can be, seen as negative or positive, whatever. You play Skyrim, you could join the Dark Brotherhood and murder people and everything else. But ultimately, you're either going to pass by doing what you're told to do or you're going to fail because you don't. But in this game, there is no pass and fail. There's just whatever you choose to do. And whether you decide that it's a failure is up to you.
Yeah.
Like you said, I mean, you take that first instance where Rey is approached by, God, I can't remember her name, the knight, and she asks him to find her sister. He could have shanked her out in the woods when she wasn't looking, stolen her stuff, and then gone on to find the sister and then ransomed her off to the king again, or whatever, right? He and I mean, it sounds twisted, but that he could have done that. That's how Infinite Dendrogram works.
I think that using her as an example doesn't technically work because her level and her job.
Okay, but I'm just saying that.
But yeah, the point that you're making is definitely true.
Yeah. I mean, if he wasn't a new player, if he was a player who was incredibly high level, and she offered him that same mission, he had the choice to do anything.
Yeah,
right?
For example, if you want to, say, for example, you have a mission of remove this king from power, you could always, kill him, poison him, or just, dump him in a ravine somewhere and let him starve to death. I mean, choices are up to you, man.
Just like the King of Alter. Yeah. In Volume 1, they talk about this war that happened, and keep in mind, Volume 1 is before it gets oh, this is what Infinite Dendrogram is going to be. In Volume 1, they talk about a war that happened between two nations, because there's actual politics inside of this world, which makes it all the more real, which supports what I said earlier about, is this real or is this just a game? That kind of stuff. In this war, the king actually died, and there's just no king anymore.
No, yeah, you're right. And there's that whole thing about how the most powerful players in the kingdom didn't join in the battle because they decided it wasn't worth their time.
Yeah.
Yep. Or they were logged off for some other
reason.
Thing prevented them.
And so I mean, there you have a perfect example. Here's players that, could decide, oh, well, we could fight for this kingdom that we've aligned ourselves to, or just not bother. And what I found really interesting is that even though there's hard feelings, obviously, nobody's going to do anything because of just how powerful those players are. It's not like anybody openly opposes them.
The players are basically like demigods to them.
Yeah.
They're basically immortal. You can't do anything. You could possibly kill them, but guess what? They're just going to come back, and you can die permanently. They can't.
Yeah, the first half of Volume 3 is essentially, these are two superiors. Superiors are like the most powerful players in each respective land. These are two superiors fighting each other in the Colosseum, and the Colosseum doesn't give the death penalty, but like it's a pretty intense fight, to the point where they have to use the controls in the Colosseum to slow down the perception of the fight so that people can actually see what's happening, and it still looks like somebody hit fast forward, Ray says.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing of like the superiors, they're basically like the chief pantheons. I mean, when Ray meets the Jiangshi dude, I don't think I'm saying the word correctly, but it's basically
It's
like
Jiangshi.
yeah, it's like some sort of Chinese hopping zombie. I mean, when he meets that dude,
Yeah.
I mean, he's actually like, when Ray gets in his way, he actually like is emanating killing intent, and everyone can feel it. It's just like, why? Why is it so cold or something? It's just like, oh god, the demigods are at it again. Like that's kind of like I think like the NPCs kind of view the players as kind of like natural disasters. Like sometimes they're beneficial, but most of the time they're very destructive.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, in Volume 2, you get to see that there's this one person that the night girl that Ray helped in Volume 1. She works with this other NPC that just absolutely hates all of the masters, the players.
I don't blame him, because like the difference between like a player character and an NPC is almost like the difference between the sky like between the ground and the heavens above. And when it comes to superiors, well, it's basically the planet from the sun. It's like the planet Earth from the sun. I mean, there's such a monumentous gap in power. It's like, what are you gonna do? Like, sure, you can take one of them down, maybe two of them, but guess what? They're just gonna come back, and if they have friends, well, guess what? You're gonna get blown away. Your friends, your family, you're just gonna get blown away like ants.
Yeah, Infinite Dendrogram is really interesting in that fact, because I remember in Volume 2, there's actually this section that takes place. The viewpoint is from the viewpoint of the Lich that Ray is fighting, and the Lich talks about how he views these like people like Ray, these masters, as like inhuman because they can just come back. They'll never die.
It's I think it's a good description of sort of how people would view superheroes, and if say people like mutants and these like superpowered people were real, I think that's what a lot of people would view them as, because they won't view them as people, because they'll view them as weapons, because they are that powerful. I mean, if I had, like, say for example, I was as strong as one of those superiors in real life, I mean, I'm pretty sure the town around me would just change to suit my whims, because they're like thinking of, oh, we can't get Bio angry, you know, he'll level the town, or, you know, don't start fights with him, he'll literally crush you in an instant. You know, and basically people would probably view me or someone like that as inhuman and truly monstrous, because they're focusing more on the power, and they're too afraid to get to know you better. Like, I'm pretty sure that a lot of these I'm pretty sure like some of these superiors or these players aren't that bad. It's just the fact that they're so powerful is what scares the NPCs, because they are like that powerful. Like, they're basically gods. They can crush towns in an instant.
Well, I mean, yeah, you do say that, but I mean, definitely in the second book, and I mean, the second book, for those who are listening who haven't read it, although I don't know why you're listening, because we're filling with spoilers, but anyway, if by some chance you haven't, of course, it actually focuses on Ray coming across these people that are kidnapping and murdering children and
eating them.
Yeah. And
yay, cannibalism.
Yeah. And doing it so that they can boost their own power. And as horrible as they are, and as disgusting as they are, there was, like you were saying, like there were these moments where they're talking about basically like, we have to do this because it's the only way we can become strong enough that we're not afraid of the masters anymore. It's the only way that we can try and, as these lowly creatures of this world, it's the only way that we can get to be their level so that we can hold our heads high and not be afraid.
I think it's a very human thing. Like, a lot of people could say, like, oh, it's power hungry and stuff, but there's always that drive that people have. I mean, not everyone, of course, but there's always that drive that people have to improve and get better. And when a lot of these NPCs see the player characters, they see that is the peak. They need to reach that peak. Only if they can only touch it for a second, then they'll be satisfied. Like, no, they won't be as strong as some of the superior masters, but if they can at least get as strong as like an average like player character, or at least like a level 30 or 20, they'll feel like they've accomplished something because they've reached the peak, because it's that drive to succeed and reach your limits. And that's very human.
I don't disagree, but the impression I got when I read the book, it was more, how do I put it? It wasn't just about improving yourself or trying to chase like an ideal. It was almost like we feel that we can't live our lives because we lack so much power for these people that are basically invaders of our world. I mean,
Yeah.
right? So we are basically trying to take back that power. We're trying to take back the feeling of we are the masters of our own fate because we have power equal to these people. Because I mean, let's face it, the world, because the Infinite Dendrogram, I mean, whether it is a game, whether it ends up being revealed that it's an alt world or however it works, what it boils down to is that Infinite Dendrogram, when that game began, there was an existing world that had been programmed or existed, whatever. So there was history in that world. There were people that lived in that world. And now there's suddenly these incredibly strong beings invading, basically, and doing whatever they want. I mean, like, seeing that from the NPC's point of view, I found really interesting. And as much as I despised those villains in the second book, there was a part of me that almost found it, dare I say, sympathetic to understand, like, okay, these aren't just, oh, I want to be like the ultimate evil and destroy the world. But it was more like, you know what? I'm sick of being afraid. I'm sick of feeling like these invaders from another place can put me down anytime they want just because they're bored or they're looking for something to do. And I don't want to be controlled by their whims. So I'm going to do everything I can to become strong.
There's something very powerful that the narrator, the bad guy narrator of that scene said that kind of made me stop for a second. Well, when he was running away and the vengeful Ray was chasing after him in a fury, the bad guy was talking about, you know what, even if I were to kill him, even if I were to kill anything and win in this situation, in 3 days, he is going to come back to me and kill me. No matter how many times I win, he's going to come back, he's going to kill me every 3 days for the rest of my life.
And that is terrifying. That whole scene kind of reminds me of the Night Haunter from Warhammer 40k. And basically, he's like some super soldier, basically. He's the Primarch for the Night Lord's Legion. And essentially what he would do on his home planet is when he was prosecuting a criminal, what he would do is just hunt them down, let them escape, and then hunt them down again. And he would continue this and continue this and continue this until they just gave up all hope of life. Like, they would hide with their friends would be dead. They hide with their wife and family would be dead. He kept chasing and chasing and hunting until they wished for death. And when they wished for death, then he would come and finish the job. And, like Ray in that instance is like, the Night Haunter. He's, he's the Primarch of the Night Lords from Warhammer 40k. He's so terrifying and relentless. Like, he'll just keep coming and getting stronger and stronger, and the fear will just grip around your neck and squash you whole.
And bear in mind, this is not, as far as the NPCs are concerned, this is not a weak character. Like, this boss that he's fighting in volume 2 up against another NPC would be an incredibly powerful and formidable opponent. And yet this is the fear that he's having facing a master who's not even been playing the game that long.
Yeah, I think they even said that like a few masters were killed when they tried to do what Ray did in that situation.
I can't remember whether it was masters or was just people from the Adventurers Guild, like the NPCs.
I think
it's a bit of both.
I think they
like,
were
I
both.
think a little lower level players just go on. It's like, oh yeah, bunch of bandits, I can take care of this, and they underestimated the NPCs and probably got like ambushed or jumped or took them by surprise.
Yeah, I think they also mentioned how those masters, they didn't have the drive that Ray did. So he didn't expect Ray to have that drive to take out the NPCs, because he figured, these masters, they know they'll be back, so there's no, like, real reason for them to, well, in another way, there is a reason for them to go all out, but there's no real drive for them to save other NPCs.
Except for Ray, who's basically Batman at this point.
Yes.
I'm Batman.
Well, no, yeah, Terrence is right. I do remember that they were saying that the reason that they had used NPC adventurers or knights or whatever was because, it was adventurers. They couldn't use knights because of the political situation or whatever. But anyway, they had used NPC adventurers because or low-level masters, because the high-ranking masters, that would be a problem. It wasn't enough of a reward for them to give a crap to do.
Yeah, I remember that as well.
Yeah, and like it is that whole question, and that is the thing. Like I said, I mean that's what I really liked about this series, is that it got into those deeper parts and darker areas, and that you could have somebody who, in any other story, was the most disgusting, heinous creature, and yet there was a part of you that was like, God, I can't help but kind of sympathize with. I don't like what he's doing. I hate what he's doing. I hate how he's going about it. But his reasoning for wanting to accomplish it, I can't totally disagree with.
Should we talk about Rook, the boy pussy of the series?
The pimp.
Yes.
The top, or was he the bottom?
Wow, really? We're going there?
He was the top.
Oh my.
He was the top. Okay.
What? Jesus.
Yeah. In case if you don't know what we're talking about, listeners, we're referring to like a page from Volume 1, I think it was, where Ray and Rook are passing by these girls, and they're like, "Who do you think takes it? I think the blondie."
Yeah. So yes, it is not us. It's not us just being horribly inappropriate. It was actually in the book that was discussed.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I saw Rook's job class, I was like, I really don't know what to think about this series right now. So Rook is what do they ever actually say? Like, Ray just says how old he thinks he is, right? Like he's around 14, 15 by appearance.
Yeah,
around there.
Yeah,
he's like a mid to late teenager, but definitely under 18.
Yeah, his job class is pimp. It actually is pimp, and his embryo is a succubus. And because he's underage, the worst thing that the succubus can do is perform a massage.
Yeah, he has to wait for the R18 patch.
He has to wait until he turns 18, and then everything that is 18 and up gets like unlocked for him. That's actually kind of neat how Infinite Dendrogram does that.
I think because it scans your brain and stuff, and there's like certain hormones that you don't release until you're like 18 or something like that as well.
I think you also just have to write your age on it, or maybe it just knows. It's Infinite Dendrogram. It runs on this magical system, and like one of the things about Infinite Dendrogram is like, how does this thing even work? Like it's developed by this strange guy who goes under the moniker Lewis Carroll.
Yeah.
Alice in Wonderland, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's managed by these like system admins that are like little animals.
Cheshire.
Fun fact: the dilemma that Shu got himself into was because he got like a particularly irritable admin with him when he was selecting his character, so they wouldn't let him go back and change it.
Yeah,
I thought that was pretty funny. but it's managed by these like weird animal admins, and they have like complete control over the world. And I'm like, it'll be very interesting to see how this works.
Yeah, it sounds like they're hiding something. Like, I forget if it's the end of Volume 1 or 2, but they mention almost wanting to get superiors, like, to get level 7 superiors, masters, like, for some goal. I don't know if it's nefarious. I don't know what it is. Obviously, we don't have enough info yet.
Let me just grab my notes, because I have a few theories of what, like, Infinite Dendrogram is. Like, number one, it's, like, a game invented by this, like, crazy group of just people that just want to make the best game in history, like, just 'cause. And one of the second theories I have, and this is going to be a bit of a mouthful, but Infinite Dendrogram is like a prequel to something that will actually happen on Earth, and what will happen is that the world of Infinite Dendrogram and real life will actually merge together. And the world will become like a post-apocalyptic hellhole with like video game logic and stuff like that. And then there's like one of the light novel covers will be like Ray and Nemesis on a mountain of skulls with a burning city on the background.
You really love that imagery, don't you? You talked about Toma from a certain magical index like that all the time.
What is it with you people and skulls? Because skulls are awesome.
Okay. Did you have more theories? You must have more theories.
Oh yeah, the third theory was it's a top secret worldwide government project to brainwash people and make a new type of super soldier.
Interesting. You know what? I went with the really obvious one, is that it's actually an honest to God other world, that they're looking to create these superiors to save them from some oncoming disaster. That was my take.
I prefer my post-apocalyptic version of Ray and Nemesis on a mountain of skulls, like waving a flag and like leading an army to unite humanity.
My take is either Justus's take, because it's like underhandedly mentioned in like the beginning of Volume 3 or end of Volume 2, I forget. But they mention like this isn't some like actual other world or anything, just like any of those old books tell you. I feel like it's either actually going to be another world, just like Justus said, or I feel like this is actually going to be like a game with like a symbolic purpose, and then like they're going to find out about its creation, and it's going to be something that ties into the themes of Infinite Dendrogram as a story.
Well, I mean, it could pull the whole, like, Last Starfighter thing, right? Where the game is in existence to train, and I mean, that's sort of what Bio was talking about, train the players to do something for some reason. You know what it could be? How about this? This will be is just to really crazy it up. That it is an actual game that is based on an existing world, and the game is training these players so that they can be isekai'd to another world to save that world.
Do you mean that Nemesis? Do you mean that Ray and Nemesis will actually like there'll be like an actual like flesh and blood Nemesis, and when Ray gets isekai'd to that world, she's like, "Oh, my paladin, you're here."
Yeah, I think the whole thing that I'm kind of wondering about is either it's the players, or it's the actual embryos themselves. Because don't they, in that same sort of thing where you're talking about the whole, like, at the end of Volume 2, or I'm pretty sure it's end of Volume 2, where they're kind of talking about, like, oh, we've got another one. I seem to remember thinking to myself, like, they were specifically speaking about another maiden embryo. And I kind of wonder, because, of course, you know, we know what an embryo is, I kind of wondered also if it was a case of they're actually looking for the embryos themselves, but the only way that they could get the embryos to develop was by using the master.
Speaking of like maiden-type embryos, in Volume 6, we actually find out that maiden-type embryos can actually have children.
Oh, wow.
Yes, they
That
can.
would be interesting to read.
They can actually give birth to children with NPCs and possibly player characters as well.
And I don't even know what to say about that. Well, okay, but then
it's literally in Volume 6. Like, if you don't believe me, like, read it, man. It's just like, yeah,
we
I had a
haven't
feeling
read
you'll go
Volume
this way.
6, though. We're only going to talk about Volume 2.
Yeah, we're getting ahead.
I'm not mentioning anymore, but I just wanted to mention that thing because you're mentioning the maidens.
Well, and that's why, but I mean, but again, like if you're trying to create some kind of master race, or you're trying to create a force that is going to somehow aid another world, then having the embryos be as incredibly powerful as possible, what kind of offspring would they have? Especially if they could especially with a superior master. You know what I mean? Like it's totally, like I kind of see when you're talking about that, I do kind of see it that way. Like I said, when I read it, I kind of thought either it's the master embryo duo that they're looking for, or it's the embryo itself that they're trying to get a hold of, and the masters are just like a means to an end.
It does feel like they're manipulating things a little bit. Like, I think at one point, I forget which boss it is, but they were like, it didn't I don't know if it's in this volume where they were talking about, like, they made it like a UBM. I think it might be volume 2, where they make it a UBM. It didn't have to be. So it feels like they're manipulating things to level up these masters with certain embryos that they want.
Yeah, there's definitely a force at work that is manipulating the game. And which, again, makes you think then obviously this is actually a game, regardless of how real it is. I think it works on a lot of different levels when we're talking about how does this thing work and theories about what this thing actually is. I do somehow think that it's going to turn out to be like the game is prepping them for something that is going to be another world kind of thing. I don't know how it's going to tie in together. Clearly, I need to read more than just the 3 volumes that I've gotten through so far.
Well, the reason why I came up with that, like, government conspiracy thing is because, there's muscle memory, and if the game is so realistic, it'll be like for you've already experienced it before. Like, you've experienced death in the game, you've experienced injury, and you've experienced this pain, and you've experienced combat, and you've experienced the intricacies of combat, and the skills and the stances, you've mastered all of that. I mean, if they really wanted to, Ray is basically training up to be a knight. He's training in, like, halberd and greatsword techniques. If you gave him a gun and gave him some military training, what do you think he can do with that?
Well, the funny thing is that the reverse is obviously true. If you got skills in the real life, you could use them in the game, even though they might not be a part of the system, or at least not part of the system yet.
You mean like the pimp's lip reading skills?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I guess to me, I just see the whole importance being placed on the fact that the maiden embryos are rare, and they can only come about if the player views the world as a real thing, or morally is approaching it like it's a real thing, even though they know it's not real. That, to me, I guess that's why I keep thinking like this is somehow tying in to another world, because they're looking at, we want these masters who are considerate and are caring and do actually care about what their actions do. They're not just, only in it for themselves or only in it for the gear and the riches or whatever. That was my take on it, but
my take is I want Dendrogram at least to kind of still have this narrative thing that they have going on at this moment where we are so far, where it's trying to say something like kind of along the lines of whether, like, in the future AI should have rights and stuff like that, where, like, games are... It's hard to describe, and this is why I need to give Dendrogram props, because it actually does it. It actually kind of explains it, and it's one of the thematic things about it. It's like, I want Dendrogram to be a game, but I want it to be like games are other worlds in the end.
Oh, I see what you mean. So it is a game in terms of being coding,
but it's practically another world because it's so alive,
right? But it's still quote unquote a game. I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and that the theming, some of the theming will be like, tying into that. and I feel like it's already started. Like Volume 2, I felt was like, around like the climax, it was like talking about that stuff.
Yeah.
And talking about the maiden type embryos and their masters, viewing this as like, it may be a game, but it's not just a game. It's the SAO thing, except done well, okay? That's what I'm saying. It's the whole, I feel more alive in the game than I do in real life, except not more alive. This is another world, and it's just as, it's SAO, but good. And better.
I need to correct you on a few things. Most things are better than Sword Art Online. That's the joke.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
But I think, well...
We talked about in our SAO episode. Plug in that SAO episode.
Well, we did plug this back in SAO episodes. That's what I was saying. Like, people must know that we're fans. But, well, I mean, it's interesting. Like, I'm going to...
It's a plug back. We're plugging back to the SAO episode, so it's an infinite loop. It's an infinite dendrogram loop, boys.
Oh, shit.
And I was the one who brought it up back then as well.
I'm gonna have to put like when I post this on YouTube, I'll have to put one of those little cards that says SAO podcast just at that moment. So, well, you know what? We've talked about a whole bunch of different stuff, and I mean, again, it feels like we've just kind of scratched the surface. One thing that I do want to talk about, a character I do want to talk about, because we were talking about the game and different ways to play the game. Marie Adler, the journalist that Ray meets in the first volume. We end up finding out a lot about her in the third book in these side stories. That, like, the first half of the third book is like the continuation of volume 2, but then the second half of it, or whatever, is a couple of side stories, and 2 of them have to do with Marie, where we find out a whole bunch of stuff about why she's playing the game and who she actually is in regards to her relationship with Ray. And to me, I thought, this is so interesting. So when we're talking about, and this is why, again, this is one of the things that I love about Infinite Dendrogram, the whole idea of why do you play the game, right? Like, when Ray starts it off, we don't really know why he's playing it, other than he thinks it sounds cool because Shu's been playing it. If I recall, in the first 3 volumes, he hasn't really said why he wants to play the game, other than he just wants to check it out. There was nothing really profound about it. It was just like, oh, well, it sounds awesome. It sounds really cool. And Shu's been playing it, and he's talked it up and stuff, so I want to check it out. But we have Marie, who is actually an author. She's a mangaka, right? She's a manga artist. Is that, if I recall right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And basically, she's hit a wall and can't create anymore. And so she decides to create her character, the character of her manga, and basically play as that character in the game, so that she hopes that by living as Marie Adler, as her character, she will find a way to write again.
Or she can just write like BL fan fiction about Rook and Ray.
She could.
I mean, you need to remember that scene in Volume 2 where, by the way, we haven't mentioned this yet because it isn't that important, but throughout the entirety of Volume 2, Ray has wolf ears.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes.
So, yeah, when Ray runs into Marie in Volume 2, she's like, wait, hold still a second. And then she draws like a shoujo-esque picture,
yes,
of Ray with wolf ears.
Yep. Well, but I just, to me, I thought that her backstory, I really liked how it tied into that idea of why people would play this game. I think the thing is that, to me, we really market video games based on entertainment value, right? Like, that's really what it's based on. But then to have this game like Infinite Dendrogram, where it is like a reality, a world where you can do whatever you want, to me, I was kind of like, I am really interested in seeing why people want to play it outside of the coolness factor, right? Like, what is it that makes people join it? Why do they stick with it and everything else like that? So I really liked getting her backstory and what her motivation was to get into the game and playing the game the way that she does.
Actually, just to tie into that idea, sorry to interrupt you again,
No,
but
no, it's okay.
like for example, like just to relate it back to me, and people say, "Oh, Bo-Gum's related stuff to him," but like for example, I play Warhammer Total War because I like the idea of like controlling an army and stuff like that, and it's kind of like the army history books history books I've read. It's like, oh yeah, I'm conquering this province, and I'm conquering this province, and I'm ambushing this army, and da da da. And I also play games like Battlefield because I have a fascination of war history, and now it's like, well, now I have an idea what people there have an experience of. I've been playing Battlefield 1, and it's basically almost like trench warfare for half the maps, and I sort of get an idea of what people in World War One experienced. Of course, not with the high HD graphics and coming back after you die, but you get an idea of what these people went through.
Well, I think it's I mean, we're already at a point where we have games that we're playing to experience a reality that isn't our own. There is already that element of it. And I mean, as graphics get better, we now have VR headsets. I mean, those things are kind of happening, but there's still limits. There's still, you still have to make choices that the game kind of pushes you into making. Whereas Infinite Dendrogram is kind of like not that at all.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is that you can get just a completely different experience than what other people are getting. Whereas in like other online role-playing games, you're all working together for like to fight the raid boss or whatever. And this one, or in Infinite Dendrogram, you can go do your own thing that's just completely different than everybody else and just entirely make your experience your own.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, there's something that I want to say with what we were saying earlier. The entire everybody has a reason for playing Dendrogram thing is because Infinite Dendrogram is about infinite possibilities. It's a game where you can do literally everything. It's infinite, and that's why it's in the title. That's kind of the tagline of the game as well. And because of that, it's infinite what everybody else wants to get out of the game. And so you can make some very interesting characters if you're a good writer, and clearly this writer's a good writer.
Yeah, especially in like, I'm not going to say too much, but like especially in like volume 4 and 5, like there's definitely a lot of like interesting like side villains. Like there's like the dude who's got like orchestra music powers, and there's like another dude who I forgot what he does, but like there's this one dude who's like orchestra based powers, and Madler fights him, and that was pretty interesting. Like he was pretty cool. I hope he comes back. And you have other villains who I don't want to spoil, but literally is like it's kind of like JoJo in a sense. Like you can just have all these wacky characters with these really like odd powers. Like
Yeah, and another thing that I want to mention, we've talked about like we've talked about like a lot of the narrative threads that Infinite Dendrogram has, and we've talked about the mechanics of the game and how, this game it seems so cool and it's great for a story, but we haven't talked about how good the fight scenes are in Dendrogram, because Volume 3's fight scene is really good.
also, especially how varied they are. I mean, for example, you could be like fighting against a dude, like the orchestra dude I mentioned in Volume 4, or you could be like Shu and just spawn like a giant tank or a rocket launcher.
Yep.
And just like blow past your enemies, or you could be like Rei, like riding on a horse, and your waifu turns into a giant greatsword.
That's how you know it's a light novel.
But well, no, you're right. I mean, definitely. I mean, when you're talking about the author, Tom, like you're right. Like the amount of imagination that you have got to pour into this to make people buy it, because with infinite possibilities, you have to be prepared, right?
Yeah, and also just his I touched on this while I was live reading Volume 2, and this post actually got quite a lot of attention for any of my posts. I'm not that popular on Twitter at all, but it got some traction. I think J-Novel itself liked the post. I was talking about how because of everything that the author does, the entire prospect of this is a game, but this game like it's not just nonsense or anything like that. It actually feels like not laughable and not bullshit or anything, where you could just write it off as, oh, it actually is just a game, shut up. It feels actually real because the author is so imaginative and writes... He doesn't write characters, he writes people. And he does that for the teens as well. And I feel like that's extremely important because... I'm gonna throw back to SAO here because I mentioned it in the tweet. In SAO, Reki Kawahara could have done that, but he wasn't a good enough writer to do it then. I feel like the way that the NPCs legitimately feel like actual characters, and they're hardly actually called NPCs, which is like a little psychological thing. They're called teens, and you're like, teens are NPCs, but doesn't actually say NPC all that often. It calls them teens because it's like the world setting. It actually makes them feel like, oh, these are real people. And then you remember, like, way down the line, these are NPCs. They're not real people. And then you just keep reading, and it's like, these are real people.
Yeah, speaking of like imaginative, like the author's imaginative storytelling, have you guys noticed the artwork is like really bright and colorful? Like especially like the light novel covers, like it just has this sort of like style to it. I can't really describe it, but it's very it doesn't feel like insert stock light novel picture here. Like it's very vivid and colorful. It's got lots of sharp features, and it looks like it's like colored by a children's coloring in book. I really dig that.
Taiki, the illustrator, did one of the newer Digimon games, actually. And you know who else did some of the newer Digimon games? Suzuhito Yasuda, the person who did Danmachi and Durarara. So that's pretty cool. Digimon's getting some really good authors. Really good authors, like writers for the games, but I meant illustrators, but both are fine.
One of the things I wanted to say is, like, if Infinite Dendrogram gets an anime, which it probably will, considering that we're hyping it up that much, but I think, I think the anime will ruin the art style, and it will make it look too stock. Because one of the things I like about, like, Infinite Dendrogram does have that personality, you know, the features are sharp, it's very colorful and bright, and there's quite a lot of detail. I mean, like, even in, like, Volume 3, I mean, there's a lot of detail put into, you know, those two superiors fighting. Like, you can see the intricate, like, you can see, like, the little, like, pieces of cloth on their armor, or little, like, cricks and bone, like the zombie dude, like, when he's doing his hand thing. Like, you can see a lot of the individual gears and stuff. I mean, there's quite a bit of detail than you would first expect. Of course, it's not, like, super detailed, like, say, for example, like, the Gundam art books that show, like, every single nook and cranny. But it's actually, like, quite detailed and stylish.
Yeah, it's got a lot of personality.
Yeah, personality.
Yeah, it's very unique. It's got, I actually thought when I first saw it, it kind of looked almost fractal to me in a way, like you were talking, those sharp edges and the bright colors. And yeah, I have to say, like, the artwork, I still like the black and white artwork in the book, but I don't think the style works quite as well as it does in color. The color, I think, is, like, the artwork in color is stunning. I really, really like it. Oh,
yeah. It's just like, it's like it's almost like an acid trip. It's just like, whoa, look at all these colors.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really pretty to look at, and I look forward to every single illustration I run into, even if it's in black and white, because they're still fantastic.
Oh, no, like I said, I think the black and white work, definitely, but the colors just totally make it.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, look at this picture. Like, look at this picture I just linked in the podcast chat. I mean, look at this picture. I mean, look how colorful that is.
Yep. Yeah,
like, even Nemesis's dress, like, you can see the layers and the frills, and you can see, like, actually, speaking of, like, character designs, I actually like with the character designs that all the characters look flashy, or, I mean, I would say stylish and not too, like, sexualized, like, especially, like, with, Marie and Nemesis, which they could have easily done that. I mean, I like that the author's like holding it back.
Here's the thing. I have two things to say. One of them is unrelated, and the second one that I want to say is related. The first thing that I want to say is the illustrator, Taiki, uses a lot of pinks and purples in some of the buildings, like the picture that you just linked down there, and it adds like a dream-like fantasy element to everything, and it makes it feel... It makes it pop, and it makes it like this is a game, but like this is like it looks absolutely fantastic. And the other thing I want to point out is talking about character designs and how they're handled so well by this illustrator. Have you guys seen? I don't like throwing shade at people, but have you seen the manga adaptation of Dendrogram?
No.
I've only read like a few pages. Why?
I've gotten a few chapters in.
It loses something in its manga form because the artists, the designs don't translate well to artists that aren't Taiki specifically. And especially, I want to mention, I'm not a big fan of Shu's design in the manga. Shu looks fantastic, and like he's a bear costume, and it's like it's real cute in the light novel, and in the manga it's like I don't know how to describe.
He looks like a pedo bear furry.
Yes, he looks like a pedo bear cosplayer in the manga. But yeah, the artwork is fantastic, and I want to quickly go back and touch on the fight scenes, and Bio keeps on saying that they're like JoJo, and I completely agree, because this writer is really good, and he tells you just enough about everybody's powers, but also keeps just enough of it secret. And like for several books, like I need to stress that enough. There are characters where like you'll meet them, and like their embryo is on full display in those books, but the main character doesn't notice, so it isn't mentioned. And then later on, you figure out, oh, that's their embryo.
Yeah, it's like when the main character meets Hugo. Like, you don't exactly know what his powers are. And the thing with embryos is they have different forms that have different abilities. Like, for example, Nemesis in her greatsword form just has, like, Vengeance is Mine and stuff. But when she gets that polearm, she gains a new ability called, I think it's called, like, Flying Flag Reversal, that reverses, like, status effects and something like that. So, like,
yeah,
it just, like, the more forms they have, it just branches off that basic concept. Like, Nemesis' power is vengeance, and, well, as she evolves and changes, you know, as she gets new forms, of course, her powers are going to be more varied, so you don't know what exactly her power is. I mean, one character could seem like he has the power of ice, but it just turns out, it's like, oh, no, it's not the power of ice. My embryo can change the temperature of things. Like, that could be a thing.
And like some of my favorite moments that I've read so far are just like the reveal of the embryos of both of the superiors in Volume 3 while they're fighting. That was really good. I love those ideas. They're so good.
Yeah, I also like the part where, like, Nemesis, when, like, Ray activates his ability and they both shout, like, "Vengeance is mine!"
That phrase, I really like that phrase. As edgy as it is, I really like it.
Like, the funny thing is that, like, with the type of powers that Ray has, and maybe this will tie into, like, later down the road, but you would kind of expect this kind of edgelord kind of, like, you know, you'd kind of, like, expect something like Whitehead Kaneki from Tokyo Ghoul, like, Oshiego, like, you know, you would expect that kind of, like, edgelord, vengeance is mine, urge! Look, I'm cutting myself with edge! Like, you would expect that, but Ray's just like, justice your way!
Yeah, Ray's a big soft boy, just like his brother. His brother's so good, by the way. There's this flashback in Volume 2 where it talks about their relationship and stuff like that. That's one of the highlights of Volume 2 for me. And keep in mind, the prologue of that is also really good. And then there's also the chapter that takes place from the point of view of the bad guy. Volume 2 is just really good, guys. It's just really good.
Yeah, the funny thing about Brother Bear is that whenever I see him on screen, I'm always reminded of the movie Brother Bear that Disney did.
Yeah.
Great spirits are upon us. I'm always reminded of that movie and that song.
That's unfortunate.
Oh, another thing that I want to mention, just because I'm a huge fucking nerd. They mention in Volume 2 that Shu was a part of like a Super Sentai show, and then they also mention that there are Sentai clans and Kamen Rider clans in Dendrogram. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, I want to be a Kamen Rider in Dendrogram, please.
No, yeah, you're right. Well, I mean, they've even got that whole thing in where they reveal that there's like the mecha, right, in Volume 2,
yeah.
right?
I absolutely knew that there was going to be a mecha in this series. I was thinking that it was going to be one of Shu's Embryo's forms, and then they just come in and Hugo's like, yeah, our entire like clan inside of our nation, our clan is known for making mechs. And I was like, oh, there's the mech.
Well, I mean, again, when you've got all these different kingdoms that represent different time periods, different locations and everything else, right? Different technologies. I mean, again, infinite, right?
Yeah, it's just interesting how all the countries, like they've all got like their own little political thing. Like there's certain countries like Caldina, they have like 9 masters. Their big thing is obviously commerce and things like that. They want to take over the entire area of Dendrogram, and so does Drive. But because they're two opposing sides, they have an area smack in the middle that one of them is trying to take, and neither of them is going to get the upper hand because they're going to fight each other. It's just interesting how much, we haven't even seen half the areas yet. I mean, this story is just going to be huge.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really love about Dendro.
We haven't even explored it. Like, we've only just explored one town and some places like out of it. I mean, I don't even think we've left the kingdom that Rei actually joined. Like, if I remember correctly, in Volume 6, they mentioned the Japanese kind of like feudal Japan thing, and it's like Sengoku era Japan, where like there's a bunch of warlords fighting for control, and like players are like samurai and stuff like that fighting for control for their daimyo lords, and it's just like awesome.
Oh yeah, we need to mention. Well, we don't need to mention, but I would really like to mention. Dendrogram is such like a crazy and hectic place that there is a real life cult that like exists in real life, but they're like in the game and they use the game to their own ends.
They also kidnap Rei.
Oh my god, guys. Spoilers.
Hey, that isn't a spoiler. That was explained in what I said was explained in Volume 1.
Does anybody else have like I mean, we've been talking for a while now. Does anybody else have any final thoughts they would like to inject into the conversation before we wrap up for this episode?
Yeah, I've got some final thoughts. I've got some final thoughts. If I ever actually played this game, I would join the Japanese kingdom and pilot a robot like Liberty Prime and just kill everyone and become like the shogun of that city or nation.
Well, of course, you're Bio-Gundam.
Yeah, be like Liberty Prime from Fallout, destroying all communists. Like, that'll be my embryo. It'll just be Liberty Prime from Fallout. And you see, like, Samurai's like, I'm the seer, it's God Sira!
Well, the two things that I would like to add are, first of all, Rei has a type maiden with arms embryo, but when are we going to get the type gamer girl with feet embryo, guys?
Oh.
Anyways, let's just let that sink in. Let's just let that cringe sink in. I was telling you guys that I had a terrible joke before this podcast, and that was it. I've been thinking about that terrible joke for like a week, and I finally did it.
It totally
and
wasn't
that's out
worth
of
the
way.
hype. I'm disappointed.
Hey, shut up. My second thing is Kakaitis is best girl, and she eats cheesecake, which is the best food.
So I figured I'd just mention,
1v1 me and Dendro.
I can't wait till you guys get through, 4 and 5, and I haven't gotten to 6 yet. So I think it's just going to get so much more interesting once you know everything on the table about, well, we don't know everything on the table, but more on the table about some of the characters that we've already met. And then there's just so many characters that have even just been mentioned that we haven't really seen yet. So, I don't know, this story's just huge.
Well, okay, I think it's about time for the bad guy to show up. And I'm going to have to give some criticism on this series. As I've been reading through the first 3 volumes, I should say the first 2 volumes, there was something that was bothering me as I was reading it, and I couldn't quite figure it out. But then once we got to volume 3, I realized what it was. The author is great and everything, except I feel that he doesn't have a good editor, because the way that volume 3 is structured is really confusing, because there's a good deal of the volume where just absolutely nothing happens, and then it gets to the actual conflict, the arena battle, and so that takes up its portion, and it's a great fight and everything. And then after it, we got this great major cliffhanger, and then we go into side stories immediately after that. So instead of leaving the story or leaving the volume off of a just big cliffhanger, we cut back, and then we're just really kind of draining the momentum out of the volume, going back and telling these stories. The way I felt it should have been structured is have those side stories
come before it,
more towards the beginning.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I actually completely agree with you.
Yeah, the thing with me is because I have because I'm Asperger's and stuff like that, I didn't have much of a problem with how that was structured. It was like we're getting the main thing over way to tease you to read volume 4, and we're doing some fleshing out some side stories with the pimp and the quote-unquote reporter. But I definitely understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the thing with those side stories is that they easily could have been incorporated into the main portion, because it's about 3 of the people, or the side stories are about 2 of the people that are, presently in the same box seating watching the Coliseum games.
Yeah, and also it's about what they did before it.
And yeah, there could have been they could have easily just put in a portion where, between games, they're talking a little bit about what they were up to the past days. And obviously, not give away the or at least not tell in conversations the big spoilers, especially with Marie Adler. But, they could have obviously been exchanging information, having that incorporated into the main narrative.
Yeah, I do wonder if this is a little bit of a product of, this was a web novel, and I don't know how he structured it in the web novel. Not that excuses, putting stuff at the end that just kind of distracts you, or should have been earlier, but I just think maybe these were stories that he fleshed out later on. He didn't really, not that he didn't have an idea where he was going, but I'm just saying maybe he wanted to write something in between catching up with that other stuff or continuing the story. So maybe he made these after. I don't know.
Actually, speaking of the web novel, and there's another point that Terrence just brought up, I have a feeling the writer does know what he's doing, because Infinite Dendrogram is giving me that vibe of this grand narrative kind of thing, similar to a certain magical index or Strike the Blood, where there's a grander scheme, there's a bigger play going on. It's just going to take a while to get into those books. And another thing I want to add is, does actually anyone know sort of what the 411 on the web novel version is? Because what exactly is the lowdown for that?
Well, I was talking to Steiner. We didn't specifically talk about the web novel, but while we were having conversations about yeah, we love Infinite Dendrogram, he mentioned that he is up to date on the web novel and that it never loses steam.
I will say, Kyle, I totally agree about Rook's story. I think that could have easily been incorporated. I kind of liked Marie's story being on its own, though. I don't know how that, to me, I guess, I kind of liked that reveal being completely separate and not knowing about it for the part of the novel where they were sort of together. You know what I mean? Like that whole thing of him like sitting next to her and talking about things that have happened and everything else, and like having no idea of who she really was, and then reading that side story afterwards and being like, oh shit, you know what I mean? Like that, I you know, like I said, Rook's thing, I was kind of like, well, this is totally fluff, you know, like whatever. I mean, who really cares?
Yeah.
Totally could have been incorporated better. I agree. But I think Marie's story really did need to stand on its own because, like I said, that reveal, having it after we've already gotten through the main story, I thought was actually kind of effective. Now, I do think that you're probably right, though. It's probably because the whole thing of it being a web novel, and I imagine that the publisher, when they were putting it out as light novels, was kind of like, yeah, volume 3 is not a book. We need more stuff. You know? I don't know whether...
so let's add, like, you know, Pimp Street Chronicles and Murray, Secret Reporter in action.
Well, I kind of think that's maybe it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking Marie Adler's story had to have been done because I'm sure that's going to come up.
I feel like, yeah.
But Rook's, maybe that was just padding for the book. I don't know, but...
Yeah, I think Rook's was just padding, but I do feel like Marie's story was probably like actually written a thing before they told the writer that they needed the book to be longer.
Yeah, that's my impression of it, was that, you know, it was really just to flesh out the third book to give it a good enough page count to actually be published. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I do think that there's that whole Rook thing was major pacing issue. All of a sudden, I was like, well, that's nice and all, but really, like, you could have just shoved that as a chapter in there.
Yeah, when I got to that part, I was like, my brain just kind of automatically was like, oh, end of volume 3, side stories time.
Mm.
But like, thinking back on it, now that you've brought it up, I'm like, should a book do that? And I'm like, no. If anything, I feel like a story like that should, if anywhere, inside of a serialized series, go at the beginning of a book, if anything.
Yeah, and that's why I blamed it on the editor and not the author, because the author will write what he writes. It's kind of the editor's deal that's like, okay, this doesn't work. How about we put this here to kind of throw more ideas and make it more edible as a published work.
Yeah, like the stories themselves, they aren't like bad or anything. It's just their placement.
Yeah, like I actually like those side stories because it helps like flesh out characters, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like what some series desperately need, is to flesh out their characters, because sometimes characters will just do things and you don't really know the context for it. And now you know a bit more about Marie, and you know a bit more about, you know, Rook Holmes, pimp extraordinaire.
Yeah, a lot of those side stories too are just kind of like a preview. You know, they've got elements that are just kind of a preview for what we're going to see going forward. You know, little hints about characters. Obviously, we get the full on with Marie, her backstory, but it is important for 4 and 5, basically.
Yeah, I actually want to make a little confession. Like when I like watched Justus R Stone's review and he talked about Rook being a pimp, like I was actually thinking of Rook being in like that, you know, that purple feather cape. Like you've seen those like caricatures of pimps. Like I kind of thought he would look like that. He'd have like the gold teeth and the grill and the chain and like the walking stick and the zoot suit and the hat.
That could not be further from the truth.
I was actually imagining he'd look like that, and he'd speak like, hold up, and he'd speak like a street gangster or something like that. Like that was kind of what I was expecting he would be. And I saw the thing, it's just like, oh, he doesn't look like a pimp. I'm disappointed.
Yeah.
Write the artist.
Well, it's not that I'm disappointed in him. What I mean is, like, I feel like his character is like he's totally not that, but like his side story, even though it was fluff, I did enjoy, and I really like seeing Rook have his own little thing. I just feel like, okay, if I were the editor, here's what I would have done. I would have just accepted Volume 3 as Rook's story and then main section of Volume 3 because, I mean, Black Bullet Volume 7 exists and it's 100 pages long in English. So I think that's long enough. And then I would have done Marie's side story at the beginning of Volume 4.
Yeah. I actually, like, a part of me wonders why, like, Rook isn't, like, Issei Hyodo, but less stupid. Like, that's kind of what I expect for someone who has pimp abilities and a succubus. I mean, like, from what I've read so far, he doesn't seem like a pervert.
Well, I mean, again, that's the whole thing with the whole embryo thing, right? Is you just don't really know how it works and what factors it's taking into account. I mean, like I said, the only thing is that we really know for sure is with the maidens, it's that whole how do you perceive the game. But with everybody else, we're just kind of left up to kind of question just what?
If I think I remember correctly, it was like some sort of personality thing, like they did like with Nen and Hunter x Hunter. Like I think Guardian types is what his succubus is. I think they said that Guardian types are people who feel lonely, and Arms types are people who feel like powerlessness. Like, don't quote me on this because it's been a while since I read that paragraph. But I know they mentioned something like there's common traits that people will have for like the certain types they will have.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I'm looking it up. So I actually wrote them down. So Guardian, cowardly, lonely, and that's why they have weapons and high defense or whatever.
And the thing with maiden types is, you know, they can kind of be like hybrids of that. Like they're basically like hybrid, you know, embryos. And I think also like obviously it's going to apply in different ways, but maybe that's a part of Rook's character. Like we don't know what he feels deep down, like including Ray and Marae and, you know, Big Brother Bear. Like we don't exactly know what they feel deep down, and this is what the Embryo System is bringing that to life, which is why I find Ray a lot more interesting than I find your average lawful good character.
Yeah, well, I do think that that's one of the things that I find very interesting about the game and why I find myself more interested in who these characters are in the real world than I would in, say, just about any other VRMMO light novel series, right?
Yeah, being like, for example, with Sword Art Online, we already know who Kirito is.
Well, I mean, like, really, like, shut up and get back in the game and kill stuff. Like, really, like, that, like, in a lot of these books that you're reading about VRMMOs and stuff like that, that you're like, I don't really care about what's going on in the real world. Get back in the game because that's where it's interesting. And with this,
you're like Overlord or like Log Horizon, where they're stuck in the game and they go along with it, and you learn more about them. And the real world becomes a bit more interesting because it justifies why they act that. Like for example, in Log Horizon, Akatsuki, like she has a complex about her height, and it definitely like justifies the reason why she acts the way he does. And like the similar thing of Nyata, like he acts like this suave jazz cat, and you know, I don't think they went so deep into why he acts like that, but they basically said that something happened to him and it changed his entire outlook, and that's why he acts like this very suave, mature, you know, jazzy gentleman, and he seems very world-weary and wise, kind of like. And then you've got like, you know, I think he's the elf dude. He's the arrow dude who like went away when they're like forming the government of Akihabara. Like in season 2 of the anime, I don't know when this is in the novels, but he talks about how this game, you know, helped him create friends and create bonds with people and stuff like that. And that's just like, and I think Log Horizon makes a pretty good case of how the real world can be interesting. But in, say, for examples of, like, Sword Art Online or those other games, like, it literally is, we don't care about your real life. Go fight Death Gun or go save your girlfriend from the creepy pedo rich dude and the tentacle monsters, you know?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, that's it. And this, because of Infinite Dendrogram, I think it's kind of that, I think it's almost like bridging the gap, right? Like you said, like in something like Log Horizon where people are trapped and you're learning about who they are in the way that they play the game and strictly play the game because there is no other reality. Infinite Dendrogram, I find, interesting because it's kind of like how they're playing the game. Is that who they really are in reality? You know what I mean? Like the game actually makes you doubt who they actually are. You know, you're not really thinking to yourself, oh, I'm totally seeing who this person is because of how they're playing the game. No, I'm just seeing how they play a game because it's not their reality. And it's that whole, like you said, that whole unreliable narrator, right? Like, who are these people really? And that's where the embryos, to me, come into play, because the embryos seem to be kind of a distillation of who they actually are. So it's like you said, you can see a guy and he's got this incredibly super powerful embryo, and you're like, he must be like this super powered, incredible guy in real life and reality. No, the embryo is super powered because he's a weak, cowardly little kid who can't stand reality. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that to me,
or like better yet, you see this dude whose like power is really weak, but in real life he's like this Chad on Wall Street. You know, he's like the Wolf on Wall Street.
Well, but that's it exactly, right? You can't. The game does not give you any idea really about who that person is in reality.
Speaking of the idea in reality, like the thing is with the avatars is that you could literally be anything. I mean, one of the superiors is a Chinese hopping zombie. I mean, you can literally be whatever you want in this fucking game. I mean, you could be a lich for all we know in real life. Like in real life, you could just be like, you know, a 10-year-old girl who just stumbled upon this game, or some like old geezer who, you know, wants to, you know, get know what the kids are doing these days and get hip with it. Or you could just be like, you know, some Chad on Wall Street, you know, being like, you know, I want to relax and, you know, I'm going to go play this game and, you know, be, you know, just chill and relax, you know, away from the business world and the ruthless, I'm the Chad and I'm the alpha male and I win all the time, you know? Like, I mean, literally, for all we know, Ray could be a woman, for all we know. We would never know until we met them in real life.
Even if the game doesn't give you, like, if the possibility isn't coming from the game, you can create the possibility. Like, you can make a mech. You can make a manga in the game. Like, you can do whatever you want in this game.
It really is a pretty awesome series. And even, like we were saying, you know, just the author's ability to make you feel the infiniteness of the story, right? That you really do feel like, yes, there literally is an infinite amount of possibilities because the author fills it with so much diversity. And, you know, like you were saying, that battle in volume 3 between the two superiors, I mean, the way they're using their abilities and what those abilities are and what their embryos are and everything else, and why Figaro doesn't really want to show off his embryo because it's kind of stupid and boring to him. And you know what I mean? Like, that's where I do have to applaud the author. I mean, regardless of how he structures things or whether, you know, an editor could have cleaned a few things up or not, I mean, you kind of have to respect the fact that the author's been able to fill this world with things that make you feel like, yes, this is huge and vast and limitless in so many ways.
Yeah, speaking of like the infinite potential, like I think Infinite Dendrogram is also a series where you could probably make decent fan fiction out of, because literally it will never break the fucking canon, because the canon at the moment is whatever the fuck Ray is doing.
Well, I mean, as long as you created it in like side characters that weren't tied into the main story, yeah, you could tell any story. I mean, I think
that's what I really like about Infinite Dendrogram. Like, it's almost like you can almost like self-insert yourself and just imagine it looks like, man, what would I give to play this game? I mean, if this game was real, do you think either of us would be making a light novel podcast?
I'd be unemployed. I'd weigh about 600 pounds because I would just do nothing but lay around plugged into the game all day long. Like, it would be. But you know what would be really interesting? And I mean, like Volume 3, they haven't really addressed this as far as I know. But like, you think about the culture of watching YouTube playthroughs right now. Can you imagine like the YouTube videos or whatever that would come up around if people could like videotape their gameplay? I mean,
oh god, that would, like, Ray could be the next PewDiePie.
Like,
that could be the next Minecraft.
Well, but like, really think about it. I mean, and just even by how you're viewing the world, I mean, like, if you're viewing the world as a quote unquote real thing, I mean, when you kill monsters, I mean, that's not some 3D crap. Like, you're showing things being disemboweled. If like, you know what I mean?
You're showing
Like,
the bloods and the guts of the snarling monster, and then you see like Ray puts Nemesis into the monster. It's like snarling and foaming in the teeth. It's like,
like, I mean, you're just like that's the part. I'm just like, man, I could basically see guys just live streaming, you know, for days and days on end. You know, just twitch that up, you know, like, oh man, I could totally see that. If you could record your gameplay, that would be crazy.
actually, not to interject again, but talking about the thing where you'd be like fat and unemployed. I think what's really interesting about Infinite Dendrogram, and I do feel the series will cover this as well, is that how quite a few people. I'm not going to mention which characters at the moment because they do bring it up lightly, but some of the characters do actually use this game as like an honest form of escapism. And the thing I like and I respect about Infinite Dendrogram is it does literally say, like, yes, they're literally doing it for escapism because some aspects of the real life they want to forget or they just want to avoid. And I'm hoping that later in the future we'll actually see a person who obviously is playing way too much Infinite Dendrogram and should maybe go outside. You know, I'm hoping we'll get that because we get a hint of that in later volumes, which I don't want to spoil because I'm being yelled at enough as it is. But, you know, I'm hoping we'll get a few more characters where they encounter and they just say, like, you know, Infinite Dendrogram is fun and all, but, you know, dude, go outside, get a job, you know, do something.
We already know Shu has been playing too much, so...
Well, there's actually a reason for why he can do that, but I'm not going to spoil it.
Thank you.
Now I'm interested.
We're all gonna like.
I'm gonna read more as soon as we get off.
We've got to keep them hooked.
Well,
I do already own Volume 4.
Well, we'll have to come back and talk about later volumes because obviously there's going to be lots to discuss. I mean, we're going to have.
Oh, I have a lot to discuss about the other volumes.
All right, so we're hitting like the 2 hour mark, so we will stop here for tonight because I do think we could probably talk more, but you know, I'm trying to keep these podcasts to about 2 hours or less for even just my own sanity of editing. So now, unfortunately, we are not so well planned tonight because I have no idea what we're going to be talking about in 2 weeks' time.
Can I do a suggestion?
You can suggest.
Yeah.
We could always talk about Overlord or like the adventures of like a Suzumiya or what's another thing? We could always talk about like Occultic 9 or...
No, not Occultic 9 yet. Not Occultic 9 yet. I'm not ready.
Well...
I'm the Occultic 9 guy. I'm the Psi ADV guy. I haven't finished Occultic 9.
Well, then you can't call yourself the Psi ADV guy.
No, I am the Psi ADV guy. I've finished Chaos Head, Steins Gate, and Chaos Trials.
Well, anyway, I mean, we've got lots of series to talk about, although next time we should try and get at least the series that Flies and Jean-Luc can get in on, because, you know, we've kind of excluded them from this one because they hadn't read Infinite Dendrogram, so...
Feels bad, man.
So
they should read Infinite Dendrogram.
Well, you know, we all have our limitations about what we can and cannot read or how much we can read. So, so in any case, we will be back in 2 weeks' time with another episode, and I guess we'll, you know, announce it somewhere about what it's going to be, or it'll just be a pleasant surprise when you click on play. So until then,
I sometimes post what we're going to be doing on Twitter, so you know, take it as you will.
Well, I post stuff on Twitter too. I mean, I think we all do. I think we all sort of post what's going on. So, and if you want to follow any of us on Twitter or social media, you can go to our website, lightnovelpodcast.com, and you can click on the tab for the staff and take a look at all of our links are there. So yeah. So you can do that too. In any case, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me tonight and, you know, talking about this series. And we will most certainly talk about this series again in probably a couple months when maybe we'll wait until Volume 7 comes out and then we'll all try and get caught up and come back and we can talk about where it's at that point because they'll be caught up to Japan. So in any case, Thank you very much, everybody, for listening and joining us on this episode. We look forward to seeing you again. Until then, bye-bye for now. For show notes and related links, visit lightnovelpodcast.com.